An 11-year-old girl is organizing her wedding, but instead of anyone objecting, everyone is crying. What happened? In a town in the northwestern United States lived Angela with her parents. The little girl, who was 3 years old, was the adoration of Raymond and Janet, as she had come into their lives when they had already lost hope of having children. They had tried to conceive in every way possible, but their most fertile years had escaped them without any success. They visited gynecologists and various specialists, hoping that Janet could get pregnant. But despite all their efforts, nothing worked. Over time, Janet began to notice the signs of aging reflected in her body. She felt her energy draining and that she no longer had the strength to continue undergoing treatments. Every time she saw her friends happy, carrying their babies, a deep sadness invaded her. She wondered why she couldn't experience the same joy. The anguish became so overwhelming that, on more than one occasion, she found herself crying alone, hiding her tears so as not to worry Raymond. Her heart was filled with envy and melancholy, a pain that consumed her in silence. Over time, Raymond and Janet resigned themselves to a life without children, accepting God's will. They dedicated themselves to enjoying each other, to loving and respecting each other, and to finding beauty in the moments that life and destiny offered them. They both focused on their work, leading a quiet and routine life. However, one day, unexpectedly, they discovered that they were expecting a baby. The joy they felt was immense. The small room was filled with hugs and tears of happiness. Finally, God had heard their prayers. After so much pain and so many pleas, the opportunity they had longed for had arrived. They documented every detail of the pregnancy, the childbirth preparation classes, the baby's first clothes, the ultrasounds, and everything related to their future daughter. They took all the necessary precautions and care because for them, Angela was a true miracle that had come to illuminate their lives with light, peace, and joy. How can it be that a woman her age is expecting a baby? They wondered in amazement. But the miracle had come true. When the doctor gave them the news, the joy and nostalgia of seeing their dream come true after so long were indescribable. Against all odds, the impossible had happened. The little kicks in Janet's womb reminded her that a tiny version of her and her husband was growing inside of her. Throughout the pregnancy, the baby always made herself known, and that experience reminded Raymond of a biblical passage that his parents read to him as a child. Sarah, the wife of the patriarch Abraham, had become pregnant at the age of 90. Although Janet was not that old, divine help had clearly blessed them with this new life. Nothing in the world could take away the happiness they felt knowing that in less than 9 months they would become parents. From the moment they knew a baby was on the way, they felt their lives were finally complete. There was nothing more a family could want. They were well off, living in one of the best neighborhoods in town, and they wanted for absolutely nothing in terms of food or entertainment. With full bank accounts and successful careers, they had achieved everything they desired, and now they had their beloved Angela, the girl they had dreamed of with all their hearts. They were convinced that nothing could go wrong, for they saw this stage as the happy ending to a fairy tale, the perfect closure to the love story they had always longed for. As time passed, Angela grew into a bright and dedicated girl. From an early age, her intelligence and determination began to stand out, always achieving outstanding grades in school. Every time Raymond and Janet received a congratulatory letter from school, their hearts swelled with pride. "Look, Raymond," Janet would say as she read one of the letters, "our Angela has done it again. She's at the top of her class, as always." Raymond nodded, a smile reflecting both love and admiration. Angela was not only a model student, but also a girl who radiated kindness and sensitivity. In addition to her academic success, Angela proved to be an exceptional athlete. From the age of 8, she was selected to be part of the school's baseball team, something that filled her with enthusiasm. The little girl took her training very seriously, always willing to give her best in every game. Every time she pitched the ball or ran the bases, Raymond and Janet would look at her with eyes full of emotion. "That's my girl," Raymond used to say, puffing out his chest with pride every time Angela made a good play. Angela's success in the sport not only made her parents proud, but it also became a source of admiration for the school. Her peers respected her, and her teachers saw a promising future in her. Despite her success, Angela never became arrogant. On the contrary, she was always humble and grateful, knowing that everything she achieved was thanks to the effort and unconditional support of her family. Raymond and Janet, for their part, continued to achieve success in their respective careers. Raymond had become a leader in his field, and Janet, with her dedication and talent, had achieved a level of recognition she had never imagined. Together, they managed to build a comfortable and stable life, where nothing was lacking. The house they shared was a home filled with love, laughter, and moments shared with friends and family. Every weekend it was common for them to invite friends to their house for a barbecue in the backyard. "Everyone's ready," Janet would yell from the kitchen as she prepared the salad. The children would run around the garden, and the adults would gather around the grill, where Raymond, with a beer in hand, would cook the meat while telling some funny anecdote. The conversations would last until late at night, and on more than one occasion someone would pull out a guitar and start playing, filling the atmosphere with music and joy. Life seemed to be perfect. With work on track, a daughter who brought them so much joy, and a network of friends and family who surrounded them with love, Raymond and Janet felt blessed. There were no worries to keep them awake at night, no problems to cloud their happiness. Angela, for her part, also enjoyed this environment full of love and security. She knew that, no matter what, she would always have her parents by her side, supporting her every step of the way. Janet and Raymond continued to be the pillars of her life, her inexhaustible source of inspiration and strength. The relationship between them was like a safe haven in the midst of any storm. For Angela, her parents were the heroes of her life, always willing to give everything for her and ensure a future full of possibilities. At night, after Angela went to bed, Raymond and Janet used to sit in the living room, enjoying coffee while talking about their dreams for the future. "Can you imagine Angela in a few years?" Janet would ask with a dreamy smile. Raymond, looking at her tenderly, replied, "I see her as a great woman, a person who will make a difference in the world." They both shared that vision of a future full of achievements and happiness, convinced that they had done everything possible to give their daughter the necessary tools to succeed. Thus, life passed peacefully and without a hitch, with the family immersed in a bubble of happiness that seemed unbreakable. Time passed, but in their hearts there always remained that feeling that they were living their own fairy tale, where each day was a new page full of love and gratitude. However, as fate would have it, sometimes the story takes unexpected turns, and what seems certain today, tomorrow can change in the blink of an eye. Time continued its course, and as Angela approached her 10th birthday, life at the Garcia's house seemed to continue in perfect harmony. However, what neither Janet nor Angela knew was that something dark was beginning to brew inside Raymond. A few weeks ago, Raymond had started to notice certain symptoms that seemed strange to him. A tiredness that did not disappear with rest, a slight but persistent discomfort in his abdomen, and digestive problems that he did not have before. "It's probably my age," he told himself, trying to downplay what he was feeling. He didn't want to worry his family, so he decided to keep these ailments to himself. He kept going, fulfilling his responsibilities and smiling at his wife and daughter as always, although, deep down, he was beginning to feel uneasy. Nights became more difficult for Raymond. The pain became more intense, and insomnia became a constant companion. Janet, accustomed to her husband's closeness, noticed that something was not right. "Are you okay, Raymond?" she asked him on more than one occasion, concerned about the changes she perceived in him. Raymond always responded with a forced smile. "Sure, honey, I'm just a little tired." But the reality was different. Raymond was not only tired, but he was also scared. He knew something was wrong, and though he tried to convince himself that it was nothing serious, deep down he knew he had to find out. It was then that he decided to go to the doctor, but he did it secretly, without telling Janet anything. He didn't want her to worry prematurely. First, he needed to know what was going on. The visits to the doctor became a secret that he carried alone, without sharing it with anyone. When the results arrived, Raymond's world fell apart. The diagnosis was like a death sentence: advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctor's words echoed in his head as he tried to process what he was being told. "I'm so sorry, Raymond, but it's an aggressive cancer. The prognosis is not encouraging." Raymond's heart was filled with fear and despair. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. How was it possible that something like this was happening to him? Up until that moment, he had been a strong and healthy man, full of life. Now, suddenly, everything was falling apart before his eyes. He didn't know how to face it, how to tell Janet and Angela that his time with them was running out. The pain caused by the thought of leaving his family alone was unbearable. Raymond made the decision not to tell them anything for the time being. He thought that, perhaps if he kept the secret, he could protect them from suffering, at least for a while. However, this weight began to transform him. Little by little, Raymond became more distant, more irritable. He no longer had the same patience with Angela, and the evenings they used to spend in Janet's company were now filled with uncomfortable silences. Janet felt that something was coming between them, but every time she tried to approach Raymond, he pushed her away with excuses and short answers. "Angela, please pick up your things from the dining room," Raymond would say, in a tone he didn't usually use. Angela, surprised, obeyed without question, but she couldn't help but feel hurt by the coldness she perceived in her dad. Family dinners, once filled with laughter and conversation, became tense moments where silence reigned and discomfort filled the air. Janet was increasingly worried. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't understand what. Could it be work? She asked herself, looking for an explanation that would calm her fears. But the reality was darker than she could imagine. Raymond, for his part, was trapped in a sea of contradictory emotions. He wanted to protect his family, but at the same time, his own anguish was consuming him. One morning, after another sleepless night, Raymond looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles marked his face, and his skin began to lose the healthy color it had always had. "I can't go on like this," he thought, feeling the weight of his secret crushing him. But still, he couldn't find the strength to speak. He feared that by sharing his pain, he would make it more real. Finally, after many sleepless nights and a weight on his heart that he could no longer bear, Raymond realized that there was no more time to keep secrets. The pain in his body had become unbearable, but even more painful was the weight of the lie he had been carrying. One morning, as the sun was just beginning to illuminate the house, he decided that he could no longer hide the truth. He sat on the bed, watching Janet as she slept peacefully. He knew that he was about to break the heart of the person he loved most in the world. But there was no other choice. When Janet woke up, she found Raymond sitting next to her, his eyes filled with a sadness she had never seen before. "We need to talk," Raymond said softly, almost in a whisper. Janet, sensing the seriousness in her husband's tone, sat up slowly, her heart beginning to beat faster. Raymond took a deep breath, trying to find the right words, but there was no easy way to say what he had to say. "I've been keeping something from you, Janet. Something I didn't want you to know because I thought I could protect you. But I realized that it has only pushed you further away from me." Janet looked at him, confused, not quite understanding where the conversation was going. "I went to the doctor a few weeks ago," Raymond continued, "and they gave me a diagnosis. One that's not good at all." Janet felt the world stop. "What are you saying, Raymond?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I have cancer, Janet, and it's advanced. The doctor says I don't have much time left." The words came out with difficulty, and he could barely contain the tears that welled up in his eyes. Janet looked at him incredulous, as if she couldn't process what she had just heard. "It can't be," she murmured, shaking her head. "No, it can't be true." But it was true, and they both knew it. Raymond took her hand, and together in tears they embraced, feeling the world they had built together crumbling. After what seemed like an eternity, Janet finally broke the silence. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, with a mixture of pain and reproach. Raymond sighed, knowing there was no answer that could comfort her. "I didn't want to see you suffer. I didn't want you and Angela to have to go through this. I thought that if I kept it a secret, I could. I don't know. Make it less real." At night, when the pain kept him from sleeping, Raymond would get up quietly and go to the desk in the corner of the room. There, under the dim light of a lamp, he would write letters to Angela. Each letter was filled with advice, words of encouragement, and memories that he wanted her to treasure when he was gone. He also drew little sketches, some of them of moments they had shared together, others of what he imagined for his daughter's future. "I want her to know that, even though I won't be here physically, I will always be with her," Raymond thought, as he drew each line with trembling hands. Over time, Raymond began to secretly save a considerable amount of money, knowing that the little time he had left to live he had to use to make sure Angela had a secure future. He opened a savings account in Janet's name, hoping that the money would help his daughter in the years to come. "I don't want them to lack anything when I'm gone," he repeated, trying to find some peace amidst his anguish. But as much as Raymond tried to stay calm and strong, the disease continued to advance, and time was running out. Janet noticed him getting weaker every day, paler, with less strength to carry out the activities he used to enjoy. However, Raymond continued to strive to do everything in his power to create happy memories for his family. He knew that these moments were what they would have left when he was gone, and he wanted to make sure they were memories filled with love and not sadness. One afternoon, while Raymond and Angela were walking in the garden, he looked at her with an expression of tenderness and sadness that Angela could not ignore. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked, her innocent voice laden with worry. Raymond smiled weakly and stroked her hair. "Nothing, my love. I'm just thinking about how proud I am of you and how much I love you," hugged him tightly, unaware that her dad was saying goodbye in silence, recording in his memory every detail of that moment. Janet, from the window, watched the scene with tears in her eyes. She knew the end was near, and although her heart was broken, she also felt a deep gratitude for every day they had been able to share together. That same night, as silence enveloped the house and Angela slept in her room, Raymond and Janet sat in the living room. The dim light of the lamp barely illuminated their faces, marked by fatigue and sadness. Raymond had been thinking about something for days, something he couldn't let go of, a wish he knew he could never fulfill. He took Janet's hand gently, feeling the need to speak before time ran out. "Janet," Raymond began, his voice broken with emotion, "there's something that weighs heavily on my heart." Janet looked at him with concern, knowing that what he was about to say would be difficult. "I've always dreamed of walking our Angela down the aisle, of taking her hand and giving her away to the man she loves. But I know I won't be here to do it." Raymond's words hung in the air, filled with a profound sadness. Janet squeezed his hand, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. "Don't say that, Raymond. There's still time," she replied, though deep inside she knew he was right. Raymond shook his head, knowing he couldn't keep fooling himself or her. "Janet, I need you to do it for me. When that day comes, I want you to be the one to accompany her. I want Angela to know that we have always been with her, that even though I am not physically present, my love continues to guide her." Tears began to roll down Janet's cheeks, and she nodded, unable to find the right words to respond. While this intimate and painful conversation was taking place in the living room, Angela, who had woken up thirsty, stealthily approached the hallway. The little girl, only 10 years old, heard her parents' choked voices and stopped when she heard her name. Curious and worried, she stayed at the door, listening to every word her father said. It didn't take her long to realize what his words meant, and a deep sadness gripped her little heart. However, something else began to take shape in her mind. An idea, a plan, to fulfill her dad's last wish. The next day, while Janet was in the kitchen making breakfast, Angela approached slowly, with an unusual seriousness for a girl her age. "Mum, can we talk?" she asked, trying to sound as mature as possible. Janet, who had not yet recovered from the previous night's conversation, looked at her with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "Of course, my love. What's wrong?" Angela took a breath, feeling her little heart pounding. "Last night, I heard Dad. I heard him talking about how he wanted to walk me down the aisle, but he won't be able to." Janet felt a lump in her throat, but she let her daughter continue. "I've been thinking, Mum, why don't we make his wish come true now while he still can?" Janet frowned, not fully understanding what Angela meant. "How, my love? I don't understand." Angela looked at her mother with determined eyes. "We can have a pretend wedding on my birthday. Dad can walk me down the aisle and fulfill his dream. It doesn't have to be a real wedding, but it will be important to him." Hearing her daughter's proposal, Janet felt a mixture of astonishment and fear. The idea of organizing a wedding for a 10-year-old girl seemed absurd to her, and the mere thought of making Raymond relive his dream under those circumstances terrified her. "Angela, I don't know if that's such a good idea. It's complicated," she said, trying to be as delicate as possible. But Angela was not willing to give up so easily. "Mom, I know it sounds weird, but it's what Dad wants. We don't know how much time he has left, and I want him to know that I love him as much as he loves me. Please, Mom." Angela's voice cracked, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. Janet couldn't take it anymore. In an instant, she took her daughter in her arms, feeling both of them collapse in an embrace filled with tears and emotion. "It's okay, my love," Janet whispered between sobs. "We'll do it. We'll do whatever it takes to make your dad happy." They stayed like that for a long time, sharing their pain, but also the determination to do something special for Raymond. They knew it would be difficult, but they also knew it was the right thing to do. With the decision made, the Garcia's house began to transform into a space of preparation and hope, albeit a fleeting hope. Janet and Angela, with the help of close friends and family, set about organizing the ceremony that, while symbolic, would lead Raymond to live out one of his last wishes. The plan was simple but full of meaning, an event that needed no ostentation, only love, and the certainty that they were creating a moment that would be etched in their hearts forever. The days leading up to Angela's 11th birthday were filled with whispers and nervous laughter. Janet kept up appearances with Raymond, carefully concealing the details of what they were planning. "It's just a small celebration for Angela," she would say with a smile that hid much more. Raymond, who no longer had the energy to question anything, just nodded, trusting that his family always did the right thing. Meanwhile, Angela tried on her white dress in the bedroom mirror, feeling a tickle in her stomach, as if it were a dream come true. It was a simple dress, nothing extravagant. But when she wore it, Angela saw herself as a little bride. She knew that this gesture was the most she could do for her dad, and that gave her strength to go on, even though she knew that behind it all was a reality none of them wanted to face. The dress had been a gift from a neighbor, an older woman who had lost her husband years ago. Upon hearing what they were planning, she did not hesitate to offer her help. "Angela looks beautiful," said the neighbor with a nostalgic smile as she adjusted the final details of the dress. "Your dad will be so proud of you." Angela smiled, though she felt tears were always on the verge of welling up. "Thank you, Mrs. Carmen," she replied in a soft voice. Whenever she spoke of her dad, she felt the words weigh more heavily on her tongue, as if the mere act of mentioning him brought the inevitable goodbye even closer. Janet, for her part, coordinated everything with a precision that bordered on obsessive. She knew that everything had to be perfect, not for appearances, but because she wanted Raymond to carry with him a memory that would accompany him in his final days. The day before the event, she spoke to the photographer, a man known for capturing the most intimate and meaningful moments of people in their final days. "I want these photos to be something Angela can have forever," Janet explained, with a mixture of pain and determination in her voice. The photographer, touched by the story, promised he would do his best. The long-awaited day finally arrived, and with it, a mixture of emotions that filled the air at the Garcia's house. From early on, the house was bustling with activity. Friends and relatives arrived with smiles full of affection, but with eyes that betrayed a shared sadness. Everyone knew that this was no ordinary celebration, but an act of love, a desperate attempt to cling to the last moments of happiness in the midst of a reality that was becoming increasingly inescapable. The garden, decorated with fresh flowers and soft lights, seemed like a scene from a fairy tale. The sun shone with a warmth that enveloped everyone present, and the soft murmur of conversations mingled with the whisper of the wind through the trees. Janet oversaw every detail, making sure everything was in place, though her mind was elsewhere, lost between memories and the pain she was trying to keep at bay. She had done everything possible to make that day perfect, so Raymond could live his dream, if only for a brief moment. Meanwhile, in one of the bedrooms, Angela was getting ready. Her white dress fell softly over her small figure, and the crown of flowers resting on her hair gave her an air of innocence and purity. However, her eyes reflected a maturity beyond her 10 years, a deep understanding of what that day meant not only for her, but for her dad. Janet entered the room to help her with the final details, and, seeing her, felt her heart fill with pride and sadness at the same time. "Are you ready, my love?" Janet asked in a voice she tried not to break. Angela nodded slowly, studying her reflection in the mirror. She knew she was about to experience a moment she would never forget. With a shy smile, she turned to her mother and hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Mom," Angela whispered, knowing that without her mother's effort and love, none of this would have been possible. Finally, it was time to go out. Angela took her mother's hand, and together they walked towards the garden, where the guests were already waiting in respectful silence. Raymond stood there, dressed in his best-kept suit, though his frail body and pale face betrayed the battle he was fighting. When he saw Angela approaching in her white dress, his eyes filled with tears he could barely hold back. Each step his daughter took was a blow to his heart, a reminder of all he was losing, but also an affirmation of the love that bound them. Angela, with her hand still in her mother's, walked towards Raymond with an expression of determination on her childish face. When she reached his side, she let go of Janet's hand and turned to him, extending her small hand towards her dad's. "Dad," she said in a soft but firm voice, "will you walk me down the aisle?" Angela's words echoed in the silence of the garden, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Raymond felt his heart breaking into 1,000 pieces, but it was also filled with a joy he had not experienced in a long time. It was as if, in that instant, all the pain and anguish disappeared, leaving only the pure love he felt for his daughter. With a trembling hand, Raymond took Angela's and nodded, unable to speak, but letting his tears speak for him. The two began to walk down the makeshift aisle together, surrounded by the emotional gazes of their loved ones. Each step they took was slow, measured, as if they wanted to prolong that moment as long as possible. Raymond felt his strength failing him little by little, but he clung to Angela's hand, determined to fulfill his greatest wish. Whispers were heard among the guests, and there was no lack of those who tried to hold back tears. It was a moment as beautiful as it was painful, full of a mixture of emotions that could not be described in words. They knew they were witnessing something unique, an act of love that transcended time and circumstance. Finally, they reached the end of the aisle, where a small table decorated with flowers and candles awaited. Raymond stopped, looking at his daughter with eyes full of love and gratitude. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Angela," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion as tears finally streamed down his cheeks. Angela looked at him, and at that moment, words were unnecessary. She knew, deep down in her heart, that she was giving her dad the most precious gift. Applause began to echo softly among those present as the photographer captured every detail of that special moment. Janet's tears, who had been watching from the sidelines, flowed freely, but this time they were not only tears of sadness, but also of deep gratitude for having been able to fulfill her husband's last wish. Raymond, feeling his strength failing him, allowed himself a moment of peace. He had achieved what he thought he never could, and that gave him a sense of closure, that his life, though short, had been complete. With Angela still in hand, he sat down in a nearby chair, unable to stand any longer. Guests came over to congratulate Angela and offer their support to the family, but she would not let go of her dad's hand, clinging to him as if her love could stop time. The days that followed the emotional ceremony were like a sweet but painful farewell. The Garcia family knew that Raymond's time was running out, and although they had done everything possible to prolong the happy moments, reality was inevitable. Just after the ceremony, Raymond began to weaken rapidly. What was once simple exhaustion became a constant struggle to stay conscious, and he was soon forced to remain in bed, unable to get up. Angela, who would not leave her father's side for a moment, watched with worried eyes as her hero slowly faded away. The girl tried to be strong, knowing that her dad needed her, but in the depths of her heart she felt that goodbye was drawing nearer. Janet, for her part, cared for Raymond with absolute devotion, remembering the vows they had exchanged so many years ago when they promised to be together in sickness and in health. The doctor visits stopped, and the house became a sanctuary of love and care. Friends and family who had witnessed the ceremony began to visit more often, bringing words of encouragement, prayers, and small gestures that filled the house with comforting human warmth. They knew there was nothing more they could do for Raymond, but each visit was a reminder that they were not alone on this painful journey. Despite the difficult situation, the family clung to the hope of a miracle. Every morning, Janet woke up with the same prayer on her lips, asking God to grant them more time, to allow them to enjoy Raymond's company for one more day. Angela, in her own way, also prayed silently, hoping that somehow her dad could recover and be the strong man she had always known. However, with each passing day, reality set in more forcefully, and everyone began to prepare for the inevitable. Raymond, aware that his time was limited, used the few moments of lucidity he had left to leave something of himself for Angela. With trembling hands and exhausting concentration, he drew small scenes from their life together. A day at the park, an afternoon, playing in the garden, a smile they shared during a family meal. He wrote short letters, with uneven handwriting, where he expressed all the love he felt for her, giving her advice for the future and reminding her that although he would no longer be present, he would always be watching over her from wherever he was. "I want these words to stay with her all her life," Raymond thought as he left each note in a small wooden box Janet had given him. He knew that when he was gone, these letters would be a comfort to his daughter, a way to keep his presence alive in her life. Finally, one night, after several days in which he could barely speak, Raymond fell into a deep sleep from which he would not wake up. Janet and Angela, who were at his side, felt his breathing become slower and slower until it finally stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, but it was also filled with a peace that both knew Raymond had reached. Tears came immediately, but they were not tears of despair, but of deep love and gratitude. They knew that Raymond had left in peace, surrounded by the love of his family, having fulfilled all his wishes and leaving a legacy of love that would accompany them always. Angela, still holding her dad's cold hand, cried silently, feeling an emptiness she didn't know how to fill, but also a calmness that told her everything would be all right. The following days were a mixture of pain and comfort. The news of Raymond's death spread quickly among friends and neighbors, and the house filled with people coming to offer condolences, share memories, and support Janet and Angela in those difficult times. Although the pain of the loss was immense, there was also a sense of relief in knowing that Raymond was no longer suffering, that he had found the peace he had sought so much in his final days. The photographs of the ceremony, which the photographer had captured with such care and love, became an invaluable treasure for the family. One of them, where Raymond and Angela were walking hand in hand towards the makeshift altar, was framed and placed in the living room, a constant reminder of that special moment. The letters and drawings that Raymond had left for Angela were also kept safe, waiting for the moment when she would be ready to read them and find in them the comfort she would need in the years to come. Over time, the images of that unique ceremony began to circulate beyond the family's close circle. The story of Raymond, Janet, and Angela touched the hearts of many people, becoming a symbol of love and sacrifice. The photos, shared on social media and in small local news articles, went viral, and the story of how a family faced death with such love and dignity inspired many. Angela, though still young, understood that her father's love had not abandoned her but would accompany her always. Whenever she looked at the photos or read one of the letters Raymond had left her, she felt his presence beside her, guiding her, giving her strength to carry on. Years passed, and Angela, in time, grew up and found her way in life. Although her father's absence was always present, so was the love and the lessons he had left her. As Angela became a young woman, Raymond's words and memories became the compass that guided her through the most difficult moments and the most important decisions. One day, when she had already reached the maturity of her mid-20s, Angela decided to visit the cemetery where her father's remains rested. It was a sunny day, but with an air of nostalgia that permeated the atmosphere. Walking among the tombs, Angela stopped before Raymond's headstone, with fresh flowers in her hand and a mixture of emotions in her heart. She knelt slowly, laying the flowers on the grave, and stood in silence, letting the tears flow gently. As she was there, immersed in her thoughts and the sadness that still lingered, she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up and saw a young man, also carrying flowers, heading toward a nearby grave. Angela's tear-filled eyes met his, and at that moment they both felt an inexplicable connection. The young man, named Paul, approached her with an expression of empathy and understanding. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Paul said softly, "but I noticed you were crying. If you don't mind me asking, are you all right?" Angela, still teary-eyed, nodded slowly. "I'm okay," she replied. Just visiting my dad. He passed away many years ago, but sometimes I miss him like it was yesterday." Paul smiled sadly and nodded. "I understand what you mean. My mum also passed away a few years ago, and I come here every week. No matter how much time passes, the void is never quite filled." Angela looked at him more closely, feeling that there was something about him that made her feel less alone in her grief. "It's hard," she continued, "but I think it's love that keeps us connected to them, even after they're gone." That brief but meaningful conversation was the beginning of a relationship that would soon turn into something deeper. Angela and Paul began to see each other more often, sharing not only their stories of loss, but also their dreams and hopes for the future. They discovered that they both had a special sensitivity to life and death, an understanding that only those who have experienced similar pain can have. Time passed, and what began as a friendship based on empathy transformed into a sincere and profound love. Paul, with his warmth and understanding, became the support Angela needed, while she, with her inner strength and love for life, inspired Paul to be the best version of himself. They both realized that despite the losses they had suffered, life still offered them the opportunity to be happy and build a future together. Finally, the day came when Paul asked Angela to marry him. The proposal, though simple, was a moment filled with emotion and love. Angela accepted with a smile and tears in her eyes, knowing her father would be proud of the woman she had become and the love she had found. The day of Angela and Paul's wedding was a day filled with joy, but also with a deep sense of nostalgia and gratitude. Angela prepared for the big day with the same excitement as any bride, but in her heart she carried the memory of that day when her father walked her down the aisle in that symbolic ceremony many years before. She knew that even though Raymond would not be physically present, his spirit was with her every step of the way. When it came time to walk down the aisle, Angela took the hand of her mother, Janet, who had been her rock all those years. Together they walked down the aisle, surrounded by friends and family who shared their happiness. But, in her heart, Angela clearly felt the presence of her father, as if he were there, guiding her, protecting her. The words of love and the vows that Angela and Paul exchanged that day were full of promises for the future, but also of recognition of the past and the people who had shaped them. Angela, as she held Paul's hands and looked into his eyes, knew that her parents' love had prepared her for this moment, to build a life with someone who understood the value of family and true love. After the ceremony, as the guests celebrated, Angela took a moment to look around and absorb everything that was happening. She knew her father would be proud of her, not only for the love she had found, but because she had learned to live with loss, to find strength in pain, and to move forward with the life that he and her mother had given her. The photos from her wedding, along with those taken years earlier during the symbolic ceremony with Raymond, became a constant reminder that love transcends time and space. Angela and Paul, united by their experiences and their shared love, began to build a life together, knowing that although their parents were no longer with them, their legacy of love and sacrifice would live on in every moment they shared. And so Angela continued her life, always carrying in her heart the love of her father and the strength of her mother, knowing that those memories and lessons would be the foundation upon which she would build her future with Paul. Every time they faced a challenge, Angela felt the presence of her father, reminding her that love is the most powerful force of all, capable of overcoming any obstacle and illuminating even the darkest of days.